Welcome to a mesmerizing journey through the captivating world of Gog and Magog in religious art and iconography, a visual exploration. Join us as we unravel the mystique and symbolism behind these enigmatic figures that have left an indelible mark on the canvas of human imagination. Gog and Magog are two figures who appear in the Bible and the Quran, where they are described as enemies of God and humanity. In the Bible, Gog is identified as the ruler of Magog, a land in the north. In the Quran, Gog and Magog are two tribes who are released from their prison at the end of time to wreak havoc on the world. Gog and Magog have been depicted in religious art and iconography for centuries. These depictions vary depending on the religious tradition and the time period in which they were created, but they often share some common themes. Gog and Magog are often portrayed as giants or monsters, and they are sometimes associated with other symbols of evil and chaos, such as wild beasts and dragons. One of the earliest known depictions of Gog and Magog is found in a 6th century Byzantine mosaic at the Church of San Vitale in Ravenna, Italy. The mosaic shows Gog and Magog as two bearded men with fierce expressions on their faces. They are dressed in armor and carrying weapons, and they are flanked by two wild beasts. Another early depiction of Gog and Magog can be found in the 11th century Bayeux tapestry, which tells the story of the Norman conquest of England. In the tapestry, Gog and Magog are depicted as two bearded giants who are fighting against the Norman army. In the Middle Ages, Gog and Magog were often depicted in apocalyptic art, which depicted the events of the end of the world. One of the most famous examples of this type of art is the 15th century Book of Revelation by the Flemish artist Albrecht Dürer. In Dürer's illustrations, Gog and Magog are depicted as two monstrous giants who are leading an army of demons against the forces of good. Gog and Magog have also been depicted in Islamic art and iconography. One of the most famous examples of this is a 16th century miniature painting from the Shahnameh, an epic poem about the history of Persia. In the painting, Gog and Magog are depicted as two fierce warriors who are leading an army against the forces of Islam. In the modern era, Gog and Magog have continued to be depicted in religious art and iconography. One of the most famous examples of this is the 19th century painting, The Last Judgment, by the French artist Gustave Doré. In Doré's painting, Gog and Magog are depicted as two monstrous giants who are being thrown into the lake of fire. In addition to the examples listed above, there are many other depictions of Gog and Magog in religious art and iconography. Some other notable examples include a 12th century fresco of Gog and Magog from the Church of Sant Climent de Tal in Catalonia, Spain. A 14th century manuscript illustration of Gog and Magog from the Lattrell Psalter in England. A 16th century painting of Gog and Magog by the Italian artist Jacopo Bassano. A 17th century woodcut of Gog and Magog by the German artist Albrecht Altdorfer. A 19th century painting of Gog and Magog by the English artist William Blake. A 20th century painting of Gog and Magog by the Russian-American artist Nicholas Roerich. Literal interpretation. One way to interpret the depictions of Gog and Magog is literally. This means that they are seen as actual beings who will one day wage war against God and humanity. This interpretation is supported by the fact that Gog and Magog are mentioned in both the Bible and the Quran, which are considered to be holy texts by Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Symbolic interpretation. Another way to interpret the depictions of Gog and Magog is symbolically. In this interpretation, Gog and Magog represent the forces of evil and chaos that are always present in the world. They may represent different things to different people, but they are generally seen as a threat to God and humanity. Political interpretation. Some people have also interpreted the depictions of Gog and Magog in a political way. For example, during the Middle Ages, Gog and Magog were sometimes seen as representing the Muslim threat to Europe. In the modern era, they have sometimes been seen as representing the threat of communism or terrorism. Psychological interpretation. Finally, some people have also interpreted the depictions of Gog and Magog in a psychological way. In this interpretation, Gog and Magog represent the dark side of human nature. They may represent our fears, our anger, or our capacity for violence. Conclusion. The depictions of Gog and Magog in religious art and iconography are complex and multifaceted. They can be interpreted in a literal, symbolic, political, or psychological way. The most appropriate interpretation is likely to vary depending on the individual viewer and the context in which the image is viewed. Additional thoughts. In addition to the 4 interpretations listed above, there are a number of other ways to interpret the depictions of Gog and Magog in religious art and iconography. For example, some people have seen them as representing the dangers of environmental destruction or the threat of nuclear war. Others have seen them as a warning against the dangers of intolerance and bigotry. Ultimately, the meaning of the depictions of Gog and Magog is up to the individual viewer to decide. They are powerful and evocative images that can be interpreted in many different ways.